Hey folks, East of Eden grower Creedmoor Fury coming to you from his workshop. Figured I'd take a couple seconds today and upload a video and maybe even work on another one. And I got to thinking about it, and I realized how many posts I saw about people who were concerned with what method they should use, or what natural method that they could use to help work against the very many insects that they find in their garden. In particular, I see a lot of mention about things like squash bugs and Japanese beetles, and some of the less than savory worms that like to eat your leaves. Every garden, especially those that are natural and organic, they're gonna come with insects. Insects are part of the process of breakdown of nutrients. They're part of the process of reconstituting nutrients. They even themselves make waste products. And all of this is broken down by the soil decomposers. And those soil decomposers are in place to help facilitate the life of your plants. So I'm going to cover a couple of things here. In particular, I'm going to cover 7 of the most common natural ways to bring about peace in your garden. 7 simple steps. 7 simple methods that have worked for me over and over and over again throughout the years, of which there's been many years where we've been growing this garden. And these are the 7 most common steps that I like to talk about. So when someone says, hey, Creedmoor, what do you do about Japanese beetles? What do you do about grubs? What do you do about squash bugs? What do you do about all of these insects that invade your garden? Don't you have lots of insects in your garden? Well, I really have insects, but I don't have a lot of insects that are killing my plants. So that being said, it hasn't always been that way. In the beginning, we had plenty of insects that really worked to the destruction and the detriment of all of our plants. The squash bugs were there were so many of them, I couldn't really grow an effective stand of squash without taking some step to assure that I could continue to grow unrestricted squash without worrying about, am I going to leave to go to work and then come back and is every squash plant going to be destroyed? Wow. We invest so much time and money and effort into these projects. The last thing we want to do is know that the second we turn our backs, the insects are destroying it. So what do? Well, I know y'all have heard all of the things that you can do. Now what I'm going to do is share the things that I have done that actually works. Because I'm pretty sure I've done everything that you've ever heard of trying, and then a few hundred more things to go along with it. And after the past 10 years of successes that I've had, well, I filtered it down to just 7 things. And aside to this would be the most instrumental and most important thing that I've ever done in my garden to help to resist the predation of insects is to improve the fertility of the soils and improve the health of the plants. But y'all don't want to hear that because this is year 1, 2, or 3 for you, and you're just not in that position yet. So it makes more sense for you to sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and listen to a guy who can tell you from firsthand experience what he did when he was in your shoes. Really. And I'm not even going to tell you about the things that I did that didn't work or didn't have any impact at all. We're going to skip past those, and we're going to go right to the things that do work. The things that I found that I could tolerate handling myself. And if I had to instruct someone who would come in and watch my garden while I was away on vacation or out on a fishing trip or just playing music somewhere, I needed it to be simple for them. It couldn't be something that's so technical that they are like glassy-eyed, kind of like you might be if I spoke the whole time just like this. You'd really be glassy-eyed really, really fast. So let's talk about what works, folks. That's why you're here. In no particular order again, but I am going to try and start in an order that you might relate to. So, first step. If we're talking about things like squash bugs, and we're talking about things like the slower moving insects, like a Japanese beetle, then the number one thing to do that's totally natural is to hand pick them. It's that simple. If you don't like touching them and you don't really like squashing them, put some rubber gloves on. If rubber's no good, try nitrile. If nitриle's no good, try some type of cloth or leather. Something thin so you can still have some feel and so you don't start ripping leaves off the plants unnecessarily. But it is that simple, hand picking them. Why do I even suggest this? I'm going to tell you why. Early in spring, there's only a few of them around. The numbers are low. You can still get away with hand picking. But if you wait until there are thousands of them, hand picking won't work. moving right along. Number 2, small butane blowtorch. That's what I like to use for both of these bugs in particular, for the Japanese beetle, sorry Japan, and for the squash bug, sorry land of the squash. I like to use it because I can hold it in my hand, it's small, I can refill it, it's multi-purpose, I can also light my cigarettes. I don't smoke. But you know what I mean. It's a multi-use tool. It has more purpose, more function than just one item. So around here, you're going to find most of the tools that I keep have at least multiple jobs. So a small pencil torch will work. It's very easy to point it right at the insect and only get it. It's just important to note, folks, that your plants, they're highly resistive to flames. While you might burn one leaf or a small spot on a leaf, they'll make more and they'll be fine. Never have I actually burned a bug on a plant and killed that plant too. Do the stuff before there's too many bugs, and you won't have to worry about what happens after they decide to procreate and make more bugs. So attention to details early in the season it's going to be really, really, really an instrumental part of your focus. If you can do that, you're going to meet a lot of new bugs. You're going to find some bugs that are good and some bugs that are bad. You're going to see them all. All right, so let's move on to number 3. Number 3, the use of deceit. I tell you one thing and then I do something else. I show you one thing and then I really show you what it really is, and it's not the same thing. So the use of traps. There's lots of traps out there. Some of the farm supplies, some of the better organic supply houses have different traps for trapping different beetles. If you want to trap Japanese beetles, there's a trap out there that has a pheromone attractant, and it attracts the beetles and they fall into a bag and then they die in there. Most of the time that works. I will say though that sometimes the little animals will climb up the little tree and they'll get to the bottom of the bag and they'll chew through it, and then all of the insects fall on the floor. Because I'm aware that these insects fall on the floor, I'm also aware that these insects like to overwinter pretty much right where they mate. They mate and then they drop straight down to the ground where you guys got plenty of wood chips, lots of habitat for them, and then they just move on to the next set of life's instructions to make more. So this is one of the main reasons why when I do set traps, I set traps in areas where I manage. Okay, and I'm going to get to one of the items that I use to manage these things with. But the reality of it is, if you come to my place, you're probably going to see my traps that are near the gardens. Sometimes they may even be in the garden, because if I don't have a place to manage the insects as they drop down to the soil to procreate, it becomes very difficult. It becomes harder to trap them if you can't also do away with what falls into the soils. Therefore, I like to treat the soils as well. So moving on from number 3, and the use of traps is not a bad thing. And folks, if you use them right, you can actually hide them behind things, or you can put them in other little structures that help them look a little bit better. You can do that. I mean, I'm not really notorious for making things too pretty in my garden. It's all about function. Always about function first. In any event, traps have a place and a use. So, number 4, insecticidal soaps. Y'all have heard of them before? They're relatively harmless and they tend to work, especially if you have a type of water that is complementary to them. Insecticidal soaps don't work very well with city water that might have chlorine or chloramine in it, or bromine or any of those sanitizers. It may not work as well because, well, just because soap doesn't work as well under those circumstances. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to being an insecticide, you're more likely to put those things together and stress out your plant. So be sure, if you're going to use an insecticidal soap, also use a clean water. If you can't get clean water and you don't have proper water, go buy a bottle of distilled. There's nothing cleaner than that. And then put the soap in that. What rate do I use? I typically use 2 tablespoons to a gallon. Doesn't take a whole lot. You can use it and try it out. Sometimes it works on whatever breed squash bug that you might have. And of course it washes off harmlessly and decays in the soil. It does not have a 220 billion year shelf life. So it won't be there when you're done growing. It will wash into the soil and be harmless. What else? Trojan horse. Yeah, I like the Trojan horse, because when you use the Trojan horse, you're basically inviting something that appears to be innocuous or harmless into the habitat of the procreating beetles, and they really don't know what it is, and the next thing you know, whammo, it's got them. So what do we use as a Trojan horse? It's a product called Milky Spore. And I had a bag around here. No. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at the Better Garden Centers. Ace Hardware, I think, might sell it. A place called Southern States in my area has it. It is kind of pricey, but sometimes these long-term insecticides are pricey. And this particular insecticide is a natural one. It's made with the Bacillus thuringiensis. That's a bacteria that causes the larva of the insect to get sick and then pass away before it's consumed the roots of your favorite plants, which would be long before it moves into its adult stage and flies away to eat your leaves. So Milky Spore can be purchased online, or again, as I said, at your favorite home center or gardening center. Call before you go. Sometimes there's runs on it where it seems like every gardener out there is buying it up and you can't find it. And I think that drives the price up. Good advice is to get it when you're out of season. Don't have to use it that many times. I get 10 years worth of protection if I use it once in the spring and then once again in the fall, and then I don't use it again for another 10 years. It almost works like clockwork to the day. All right, number 6. Well, I kind of gave it away. Milky Spore is BT, and BT is Milky Spore. And it can be applied via the Milky Spore, which is in almost like a granular form, or it's got like a sand or a grit, and it adheres to that, and that tends to stick around. It's very time release. Whereas the BT that I'm going to suggest next is something that is formatted in a liquid state, and you would add a couple of ounces of this per gallon of water. Again, back to chlorine-free water. We don't want to make the plant sick. And then you would spray it on the tops and the bottoms of the leaves. It does wash off in the rain, but it washes into the ground where it works yet again. Okay? So BT is another great tool to use. I've used it. I do use it. I make my compost teas. If you look at my compost tea videos, you're probably going to see me discussing its effectiveness. And I try not to go without it as long as I know that there's an insect brood that's within cycle and within reach of my garden. All right? Last but not least, the number 7 fix. The number 7 fix is a myco-insecticide that's made utilizing a form of mycology. I think my puppy wants to go out. And that particular mycology produces a disease called Muscardine disease. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not sure. It sounds like muscadine, but it's not the grape. It's actually a disease. It causes this disease in the critters that it infects. And little hairs grow from the critter, and eventually the critter also shares this mycology with its friends and family, therefore by which reducing the colony's size, and naturally it even helps the purpose of the insect, because the insects, they never grow immune to this stuff. It's not a toxic chemical, it's just a biological form, it's a fungal form, and over time what ends up happening is, it is my belief that the subsequent generations that come after that one are better endowed with their original and primal impulses. So anyway, there's the top 7 picks for how I would go about handling these particular insects that are in my garden. So the more you know, the better you grow. Live well and grow better.